Okay, back together again. We're rocketing on with First Peter, and we had to skip a week, but we're back together. So it's great to have everyone back on track, and we ended up finishing up, not quite getting to the end of 2. So, and we really began a real great talk at the end of 2, which is really important because it's actually going to carry over into 3 and then 4. And actually it forms a basis or part of the foundation of the whole letter. So let's go back and begin at verse 11 and read all the way through let's read all the way through verse 11 to chapter 3, because it really is a big block.
Which?
Chapter 3.
3? Oh, okay.
So who would like to read 11, verse 11?
I would read, but my Bible, I can't figure out where verse 11 is. So I could start with verse 8. Because that's when my thingy starts.
That's weird, but
Let's
okay.
start with verse 8.
All right, go ahead.
Finally, you should all agree among yourselves and be sympathetic. Love the brothers, have compassion, and be self-effacing. Never pay back one wrong with another, or
Oh no,
an angry word with a. What?
We're in chapter 2.
No, this is chapter 3.
I know, but we're starting chapter 2, verse 11.
Oh, we're chapter 2. Oh.
Yeah.
I thought we should be in chapter 2.
Yeah, 2, but chapter
okay.
2,
I'll
11.
Start over there. It's very similar.
But stop at 3.
I urge you, my dear people, while you are visitors and pilgrims, to keep yourselves free from selfish passions that attack the soul.
In the cabinet,
always behave
in the bathroom,
honorably among pagans, so that they can see your good works for themselves, and when the day of reckoning comes, give thanks to God for the things which now make them denounce you as criminals. For the sake of the Lord, accept the authority of every social institution, the emperor as the supreme authority, and the governors as commissioned by him to punish criminals and praise good citizenship. God wants you to be good citizens so as to silence what fools are saying in their ignorance. You are slaves of no one except God. So behave like free men and never use your freedom as an excuse for wickedness. Have respect for everyone and love for our community. Fear God and honor the emperor. Slaves must be respectful and obedient to their masters, not only when they are kind and gentle, but also when they are unfair. You see, there's some merit in putting up with the pains of unearned punishment if it is done for the sake of God. There's nothing meritorious in taking a beating patiently if you've done something wrong to deserve it. The merit in the sight of God is in bearing it patiently when you are punished after doing your duty. This, in fact, is what you were called to do, because Christ suffered for you and left an example for you to follow the way he took. He had not done anything wrong, and there had been no perjury in his mouth. He was insulted and did not retaliate with insults. When he was tortured, he made no threats, but he put his trust in the righteous judge. He was bearing our faults in his own body on the cross so that we might die to our faults and live for holiness. Through his wounds, you have been healed. You had gone astray like sheep, but now you have come back to the shepherd and guardian of your souls.
All right. Okay. So we ended up, we actually stopped, I believe, at verse 17. I think we read through 19, but we stopped at 17 and really got a discussion going on about what this means. So my translation begins verse 13 by saying, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every authority instituted among men. And we had begun a lively discussion about what that means and how do we do that. So I wanted to start us back up a little bit farther back in order to recapture some ground. So if we wanted to revisit that discussion about what this means and how this means, we would have the wherewithal to do it. So it's I will be happy to start unless somebody else wants to jump in real quick.
What I see, and I jumped ahead several weeks ago, but Peter's thing is always straight down the middle. You respect the emperor, he is put in place by God, respective. You don't worship him. That's what he wishes, but you don't worship him. You respect him, you honor him as someone kind of appointed by God, although some of the shenanigans they got to do there.
Yeah, I have
you
a
know.
problem with them being put in place by God because
Well,
that sounds too much like the divine right of kings.
Well, there, yeah, not. I mean, God allows it. If God didn't want it to be, he'd go wink, and then they'd be gone. And then I mean, there's nothing like someone who is in a subordinate position who just simply doesn't take the title, right? They do the thing they're supposed to do, but no, I'm not your doormat. I will clean up, but I'm not your doormat. I'm cleaning up because it is a function and I can do it, and I'm offering it as a service, but I'm not, I'm not kissing up. And so the slaves, they're the slave, they have to obey, but actually you're only a slave to God. This is just a convention. So the only person you really have to obey is God. And what God wants you to do, it's not always true, but shouldn't put you in trouble with the slave owner or whatever.
Well, that's fine as far as it goes.
Yeah.
And as far as it goes as a judgment call.
Right.
But if you take it to a ridiculous extreme, it sounds a lot like My Country, Right or Wrong. And that's.
Well, I think that Peter was dealing with
This works when times
a lot of, I mean, with what we know, the Jews from, from right before Babylon, they were just fools. Because all of a sudden they decided that complying with anything that some other person said was disrespect to God. And so they just did stupid stuff. And then eventually their stupid stuff, the Babylonian or the Assyrian or the whatever elsean, would get sick of it and say, okay, I get it. The problem is your temple. We'll sack your temple. You won't have that thing. And then maybe you can act like a decent human being. And so they'd sack the temple and everybody would mourn. And then, things got better. And then, wait a second. And so they'd come in and, hundreds of years go on between, but they'd sack the temple again. And, I think much of the problem in Israel today is we need to sack the temple again. Because they're doing crazy things. They're doing horrible things. And it's because they've got the Lord on their side. God is never on your side. You have to be on God's side. And that's a tactical difference.
Well, Steve,
so I see Peter addressing craziness of Gentiles and craziness of Jews with this, okay, follow the conventions, but remember, you're just following the conventions.
Well, Steve, what did you mean when you said My Country, Right or Wrong?
Well, I mean, there's a thing.
Oh, please, that's the 70s.
Yeah, well, there's I think where you can go along with what your country's doing, and that's what I'm going to use an example, and people may or may not agree with me. And the Jews in Israel are doing what Netanyahu says without regard to whether it's right or wrong. And it's in my opinion, they're going way further than they need to. They're trying to follow the law, trying to do exactly what your politicians tell you to do is fine. You can stay in line until it becomes intolerable, and then it doesn't. Then it's not tolerable anymore, and you have to do what you think is right rather than what the politicians are telling you to do.
Right. Okay. Hold that thought. So he was going lower than the speed limit, right? Driving his van. He was driving below the speed limit. He was following the law because it's a good law. Going that speed limit is a good law. But when he had people in need, he stopped, even though the law says you can't stop and back up on the road. But there was something bigger than the law that says don't stop. And it was the people that were in need that needed his help.
He was driving safely.
Yes, following the law.
And that's the spirit of the law is to drive safely.
No. The rule.
Wait. Let me finish. The spirit of the law is to drive safely, and it has all of these regulations that you're supposed to follow in order to drive safely. He wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to the regulations, but he was driving safely.
Well, he's down the middle of nowhere road and there's nobody he can see in any direction.
All of that's irrelevant. My point is that if we take for the fact that the law, that he was obeying the law, because the law is the law, in the spirit or not, it says don't go better than 55, and he wasn't. But he took exception to the law when there was a need for the people that were hurt or injured or who needed help. So he broke the law in order to help the people. So he overruled the community that he was living in, or the law that he was obeying. So this is actually what Peter's talking about. He's saying that the law is here. The municipality creates the laws, and then we're living in the place that we are obliged to follow them. Whether we like them or not, it doesn't make any difference. The only time that we are accepted from the law is not by our own opinion, my own idea, or what I prefer. The only time we are accepted from the law is when we are doing it in Christ's name, for Christ's sake, following Christ's example. If we don't do that, then we are giving the bad example, because at this point, we're saying, I get to stop and do whatever I want to do, even though the law says do this. I've decided I'm going to do something else.
Well, taking that example of of him backing up on the road to help people, if there had been a traffic around, he would have had to make a left turn or a U-turn and go back and do it safely. He would have had to follow the law if there was any traffic around.
No, but he could have pulled over.
It could have caused more. No, wait a minute.
I've done this before. He could have pulled over on the side where they were pulled over with a broken down car, and then backed up on the shoulder, which was against the law.
Right, but what if
could have pulled over and let them walk to the bus?
Yeah.
If there was traffic, yeah. If there was traffic around and he did what he did, he could have caused more problems than he would have fixed.
You're getting in the tooling, Steve. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the reason why he would go to the extent of breaking the law. There's only one reason. There's only one reason to live in a country where there's laws, and that is to obey the law. And what Peter is saying is the only reason to disobey the law is for Christ's sake. So whether he did an illegal U-turn, or if he stopped on the road, or if he pulled over on the side, it doesn't make any difference.
Mr. Rigid is
all of this is the same thing.
He's going to translate it.
Let me read you something else here. Hold on a second. Remind the people to be subject to the rulers and the authorities, to be obedient, to be ready to do whatever is good, to slander no one, to be peaceable and considerate, to show true humility towards all people. All right. That's Paul and Titus. Here in Colossians, he says, slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything, and do it not only with when their eye is on you to win their favor, with sincerity of heart and reverence to the Lord, only to the Lord. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, working for the Lord, not for your slave owner, since you know that you'll receive the inheritance from the Lord as reward. It is the Lord, Christ, you are serving, not your slave owner. Anyone who does wrong will be repaid for his wrong. There is no favoritism for the self. You're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the Lord. And then in Romans, everyone must submit himself to the governing authority. This is Paul again, of course.
Right.
There is no authority except that which God has established. The authority that exists have been established by God. Consequently, he who rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring wrong judgment upon themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do the right, but for those who do the wrong. Do you want to be free of fear from the one in authority? Then do what is right, and God will commend you. For the king is God's servant to do what is good. But if you do what is wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword for nothing. He is God's
Now,
servant,
what
an
about
agent of
when
wrath to bring
the,
punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit the authorities not only because it's possible punishment, but also because it is in your conscience.
what about when the authority is telling you to do something that you believe is wrong?
It doesn't matter.
Not helping somebody, but
The only reason
something that you believe is wrong.
The only reason to disobey the authority is for Christ's sake. I can believe whatever I want. I can believe that balloons are wrong. And so I'm going to grab every balloon from every kid that's walking down the street and take it away because it's wrong. I can't do that. I don't have the authority to do that. Peter, Paul, and Jesus in the gospel is saying the same thing. He's saying, you have to do what God is telling you. So if the authorities are telling you to do something that is ungodly, that's going against the faith, the witness of the gospel, then you don't do it. That's where the line's drawn. But in all other instances, you're obeying the law 55 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour, because that's the law of the land. There's nothing wrong with that law. That law is a fine law. If the law says, sit down on the train, don't stand on the train, that's a fine law. There's a probably good reason for it. Sit down on the train. If I don't agree with the law and I don't sit down, that's according to Paul and according to Peter and what Jesus says in Luke's gospel, that's just avarice. That's selfishness on my part. For me to say, I don't agree with the law that says sit down on the train, and I'm not going to do it, then I'm acting specifically for me. But they're saying, all that they're saying here is, the only time to disobey is when you're doing it for Christ's sake. You're following.
They're saying the zealots are wrong.
Explain.
The zealots at that time, they're saying they're wrong. They're putting them down. I think.
What do you mean? Give me more.
The zealots wanted to overthrow Roman authority.
Right.
And they're basically saying that's wrong.
Yes. Now, that thing I just read,
Barabbas,
what I just wrote about Paul when he says everyone must submit to himself to the governing authority. He's living under an emperor who is persecuting the Christians, and he's telling the Christian people to obey the emperor. So how's that?
Let's take an example from American history. Say the Stamp Act. People were refusing to buy stamps, which the king had said that people needed to buy to pay a tax to buy stamps. People were refusing to do that. Was that wrong according to this?
And it's what's the effect of the Stamp Act? If the Stamp Act goes against the gospel and has got some conflict with the gospel, then no, it's not.
It wasn't against there was not, I can't think of anything in the Stamp Act that would have been against the gospel unless you went through some logical backflips.
Okay.
So I'd like to just interject. I think that we need to look at it maybe a little different way. It's not that you cannot question a law or a government, but when you do, you need to do it through proper channels and respect the law at that time in order to present your alternative view. So it's not saying you can't, it's saying live with it. If someone is persecuting you, then if you can suffer in that way and do it aligned with Jesus' suffering, then you will have the grace of God for that.
Mhm.
If you feel that you need to stand up and protest, then do that, and don't do it at the expense of someone else and hurting someone else, but go along the channels of proper protest for that government.
Exactly.
That's how
Yeah.
I'm seeing.
That's a good one. You can, so I don't agree with something, so I'm going to go down and protest it, but I can't break the law protesting the thing that I don't want.
So in the case, Jay, of the zealots, if the zealot was, creeping through a street and assassinated someone, that would be against the law.
Uh-huh.
And so that would not be, I think, what Jesus would support. But
I'm thinking
it's
also
not
about,
saying that you can't differ or speak up. And there are those people, I believe, in history who were chosen to present another way in defense of human rights and human protection, and try to change the course of history to better it. So yeah, we need to stand up for some things, but there's a different way of standing up for it maybe than some other people might have taken.
That works as far as it goes. But
In
then,
this,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
in this situation, God's law takes precedence over the speed limit and man's law,
Right.
because God tells us to take care of each other, to love one another. And that is exactly what he did. So I think, break man's law, God's law comes first.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And in that case, it's an emergency. You can't just pass that person by. They're in an immediate need, and that needs to be taken care of. It's not like you can be like, and then look at it like this. If there's an immediate need and there's a guy on the street and a little girl is driving her car, is it right for her to stop and help that guy? Maybe not. Maybe she just needs to get on the phone and call 911 and say there's a guy stopped on the road, because maybe it's not safe for her. So, I mean, there are caveats to everything, right? But I think that, Sharon, it's right. The immediate need is what this is addressing. So we need to, and like the guy at the side of the road, address the immediate need. The compassion and the care for human beings and doing what Christ would do is the number one.
Yeah, God's law is more important.
Yeah. Yeah, but I like what you said, Sue. That's a really important point. If I am protesting a law that I think is bad because it goes against what I understanding the gospel, right? Treating people well, then my protest has to be done within the context of the law. So I can't go break the law in my protest, because the law against breaking down someone else's fence in my protest is a separate law. So now I'm just becoming a vandal to try to prove my point. So this goes back to saying the laws of the municipality, the laws that are there to be obeyed unless they are in conflict with the gospel. If they are in conflict with the gospel, then I break the law and I pay the price. So Jesus broke the law. What was going on? The law was in conflict with the gospel. When he broke the law, they killed him. He didn't fight back. He didn't, take the opportunity to grab a stick and bludgeon a Roman soldier or poke the eye out of the high priest. He had the chance. He broke the law because it was the right thing to do, but then he didn't continue to break laws in order to further the point that he had about the original law that he was protesting. So it always comes back to the gospel and the example of Christ. This is why you have, for instance, we've got the legacy in the Christian faith as well as other faiths of nonviolent protests, where people do sit-ins and things like that, because they're saying, I'm not going, the idea there is that I'm not going to break another law in order to approve the law that I think needs to be eliminated. And then, of course, the municipality makes new laws, so I can't do my sit-in because it's against the law to sit where I was going to sit. So it goes back and forth and back and forth. The point is, we don't get in the Toolies like we were. It is that the only reason to break the law, what Sue, I think you said it perfectly. If I have something I think is wrong, then I need to speak up. I need to address it. I need to try to change it. I need to make it known. And if I'm going to make a stand that I'm not going to obey it, then I'm not going to obey it. But I'm not obeying it because of the gospel, not because I don't like it. This is why when Jesus talks about it and Paul talks about it over and over, and then Peter talks about it, it's always the same. All of their language, you can hear their language is all the same. They keep coming back to the same thing again, again, again. I like what Carol Lee said. Certainly no one could say, I don't think anybody would say that God appointed, Diocletian or any of the other emperors, Nero, that was a horrible, arguably possibly crazy person who killed people willy-nilly and burned Rome down and all the rest of it.
Reasoned
God
by
did not
something.
appoint him, but
I can't remember what it
God
was.
allowed Nero to become the emperor
Could have been led.
within the context of human history. A lot of people have become and are currently rulers that we all are like, how can this happen? But the furthering of that, no matter what terrible thing might go on within the context of their ruling, is what comes out of it. What is the coalescing factor after that person, or in the moment of that person's rule? What happens? So what is happening there for people of faith is the response to that person is what God is allowing to happen. So that's why Paul and Peter both are saying this person is allowed to do this thing by God. God is there's a purpose to this. The purpose is known by the people of faith, not necessarily by the people who don't have any faith, because they're not looking for God within the context of whatever's going on. They're looking at the circumstances, not through the circumstances to the opportunities. Yeah, it's gonna keep going. We're gonna keep going on it. It's gonna keep reiterating itself over and over and over again. If I want to change a law, I can't change the law on my own volition. I have to change the law based on the gospel. Otherwise,
I keep thinking about the American Revolution, and
That's just because we were cheapskates.
well, there's that argument also that, but the king kept passing laws, or kept promulgating laws that the colonists were supposed to follow. The colonists it was not arguably against the gospel, but the colonists were just kept breaking those laws. Eventually, the king sent soldiers, and then it turned violent on both sides. I don't see how the gospel is operating in a situation like that, where people are deciding that they have their own right to self-determination or whatever.
What we don't know is that the American colonies had the highest standard of living of any place in the British Empire.
Yes.
We think poor, pitiful us, but in fact, King George had all these wars, but he was also investing a fair bit in the defense of colonists in the Western.
Right, we can go around and around like
Yeah.
this, but I
Territory,
still
so-
don't see where the gospel is figuring in this.
I honestly don't think that America followed the gospel. I think
Yeah.
that, was probably wrong. I mean, I'm very troubled by the fact that we still have children taken from their parents living in jails in Texas. Are we supposed, that was, our fearless trumpet. And you know, that's terrible karma.
That was
But we
Obama's
let that
devil.
happen. We said, oh no, you know, and this is where, you know, in our country, I think we have a responsibility to stand up for the moral high ground, even if it's,
Mhm.
you know, not politically expedient. And think of, you know, the Vietnam War, all these things where the answer was, I'm just following orders, me
Right.
lie.
Yeah.
And I mean, in Texas and Arizona, it's a crime to give someone going across the desert water.
Yeah.
People have been through that, and the woman's defense who did that was, but as a Christian, this is what I'm supposed to do, and you're interfering with my expression of religion. And you know, she went to jail and she said, sure, and I'm going to be out there doing it again.
Right.
You know, people die every year of dehydration.
Yeah. So that's so she's an
Um,
example of exactly what Peter and Paul are talking about. They're saying if the municipality, if the king or the governor has made a law that is contrary to the gospel, and if you are a Christian who knows that, then you're going to be willing to go out on a limb and pay the price for breaking that law for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of Christ. That's the reason why. It's not, you know, she went over there in the desert and said, well, I just wanted to bring those people water because it made me feel so bad. Well, there's a permutation in the gospel with that person that she's want to do that thing, but that is not the reasoning of what Peter and Paul is talking about. They're saying you may have a conscience and do this thing because you know that what you're doing is right, but that's not what Peter and Paul are talking about. They're talking about exactly what that woman said. This is a gospel thing. This is a Christ thing. This is a God thing, and I'm going to do it because this is what God tells me to do.
And
That's
I think it's important for us to remember that this earthly realm is the realm of the devil. So there's probably more people here, or certainly strong forces that are doing those evil things. And they may come into leadership roles and they may come make laws. And you know, good things happen to bad people. And the Christians are God's little army on earth trying to hold the space and make a difference. And the vast majority, it may feel like at times, is not that good gospel way, the good Christian way. We're just a little part, but that's the way it is right now. That God is allowing that to happen right now for whatever God's reason and purpose is. And maybe it's just so that we can turn to Him and pray, please help us make a difference. Please send us more people so we can have a little bigger Christian army, whatever that is. But it's going to be like that until the second coming. It's going to be like that until, you know, the end of the world, because this
I
that
mean,
we're
I do
living
think
in
that as
is the
Christians in
devil's
the
realm.
last, I don't know, 20, 30 years, we've been too smarmy about a lot of things that as Christians we should have fought back. We should have mouthed off. We should have said, "Not on my watch." And you know, there are movements afoot to destroy democracy in this country. They want to have authoritarian rule. They want to have authoritarian rules that everybody has to follow, and they're all going yay yay. And you know, it chills me because it's fine if if you're okay, if you're in the space of the rules, but you don't know what's going to happen. And a lot of these rules, it's just God's benevolence that you aren't on the other side of it. That's it. It's not that you've been good. It's just that God has let you not be on the wrong side. And we have to defend, you know, people's rights and freedom as God created people.
Well, I don't think that's being disputed.
What?
I don't think that's being disputed.
I don't think we're active enough about it. I think that we're wimps, and not wimps. I think that we don't push soon enough.
Mhm.
And we let people say these sort of outlandish things, and they should be getting a rebuttal from we should be more politically active. We should be more prayerfully active. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we should be more of, and not just say, oh no, we should just, he's the ruler,
Yeah, if I
he's
think
the
you're right.
governor, he's stealing from these immigrant children, but he's the governor.
Yeah, I think that you're right, Curly. I don't think that's what Peter or Paul is saying. I think that they're saying exactly what you're saying, is that if there's something that needs to be, there's something that's going awry in based on the gospel, then you should do something about it. It's the inaction to not do anything about it is the same as doing something about it, not for the gospel, just for me. Either way, I'm doing something or not doing. Doing nothing is doing something, right?
Right, it's
If I don't do,
complicit.
you're right, but the doing nothing is based on my decision. I'm not going to do it. So what Peter and Paul both are saying,
Omission.
your decision,
The sins
whether-
of omission.
Oh, mhm.
Peter and Paul are saying whether or not you decide to do nothing or you decide to do something, if the decision is based on your desire, it's wrong. It may have a parallel with the gospel, but that's not what Jesus is talking about. Jesus is not talking about how we decide to do things that may be in a parallel moral action with the gospel. He's not saying that. Jesus is saying you're doing what you're doing. I'm trying to teach you. He said, I'm trying to teach you that you need to be doing what you're doing for me. You can do it for you over there. That's entirely possible. You're over there doing something great. Okay, you're doing it over there. I'm telling you that you over there doing it is not what I had planned. My plan is you're doing it for me because you're just a derivative. If you find that something is moral and good and true, that is just a derivative of me. So if you want the absolute morality and truth, you're going to come to me. If you stay over there and think it's you doing it, then you're deluded. And I don't want you to be deluded. I want you to be in the truth. So the truth is you need to come to me. So there's no difference between me not doing anything and me doing something, but not for the gospel. If I'm doing it for me, it's the same thing. It's like I've said in a sermon, if I tell you to go to the stoplight and turn right, and you go to the stoplight and do anything else, it doesn't matter. You can turn left, you can go straight, you can sit there and go to sleep, or you can turn around and go back. It doesn't make any difference, it makes no difference. The fact is you're not turning right. And that's the only criteria. You need to turn right. So it doesn't matter what else you do. Do whatever you want. It's not turning right. Jesus is saying, if you are doing this for any other reason but for my sake, then that's not the right reason. You're deluded. You're off on your own. I'm just telling you, he says, that you need to do this for my sake. The only way that you can do that is to come to know me. You know me. I'm the King of Kings. I'm the one running the whole show. So you come to me and then you do it for me. You don't do it for you or for somebody else or for something else. You're doing it for me. So everything comes back to the gospel. And that is exactly what Peter and Paul are talking about here. Living within the context of a world where we have to live and obeying the laws of a world that are not a problem. Going 55 on the freeway is not a problem. It's the law. The only problem is I don't want to go that slow. I want to go faster. So I'm deciding to go faster. So what they're saying is that, Peter's saying is that if this is the law and you don't think this is a righteous law, if this is against the moral law or the spiritual law or the witness of the gospel, then go change it. Go make it happen. But don't break the law, because this is what we read before. This was right above it in 2, right? He says, dear friends, I urge you as aliens and strangers in the world. That's where it starts. That's the foundation. So we're already at a problem if we think we're in the world and we really belong here and we're a thing here. That's wrong. He's saying if you're aliens and strangers in the world, to abstain from sinful desires which war against your soul. What's the sinful desire? When we hear the word sinful desire, we think pornography. or drinking, or I don't know what else. Think of some big sinful desire. That's what we think of. But within the context of sinful desires is pride. It's selfishness. It is self-grandizement. It is narcissism and everything that goes with it. So sinful desires is me doing things for my sake, what I want to do. And damn the torpedoes and everybody else. I'm going to do what I want. Live such good lives among the pagans. And the other word he uses here is the Gentiles. It just means as unbelievers, non-Christians. So live such good lives among the non-Christians so that they will not accuse you of doing anything wrong. They may see your good deeds. He's going 55 and glorify God on the day that he visits us. So they're looking at this person and saying, oh, he says he's a Christian, but he's going in the pornography store. And that's the extreme example. I know that guy's a Christian. Look what he's doing. So the witness is gone. But what Peter and Paul are saying, and Jesus has said the same thing. Remember, they're just repeating. Peter and Paul are just making a commentary out of the gospel. They're saying, Jesus is saying, it's not the big things, it's the little things, because the little things betray your heart. If you're not going into the pornography store because you don't want to be seen by everybody, but you're really doing this when nobody's looking, that's what Jesus is concerned with. He's not concerned with the other stuff. But he's saying if you have a chance to, if you're put in a circumstance where this is going to be a image that sticks with people, then don't do that. Don't give them the reason to think that you are doing something that you are not doing. Don't break the law and give them ammo to say, oh, Christians are all phony. Look at that guy. He says to do this stuff and then he's doing something else. Look at that woman. She says to do this thing and then she's doing something else. He says, don't do that, because the recompense is mine on the day of judgment. That's one. But number two, by being the person that you are, by not breaking the law, by obeying the law, even though it may be inconvenient for you, your witness to them may change their heart. They may see you and say, oh, look, she's able to do this and she's not mad and screaming and angry and biting the heads off of everybody around her. She's actually just doing it, and she's got some kind of peace about doing it. And I'd like to have that too. What's her secret? And then you find out, oh, she's a Christian. Well, I'm gonna look into that, because I don't know anything about that, but she must have something going on because she's obviously doing something right. That's why all that follows that we have about obeying the king, and it's going to go into husbands and wives, how they obey each other. He's already talked about slaves, husbands and wives, and then communities in harmony, living in harmony, is all based on this beginning of this section on verses 11 and 12, saying, first off, you don't belong to the world. Susan said it exactly right. Jesus said the devil owns the world. The world belongs to the devil right now. So you are resident aliens. You're in the world, but you're not of the world, as Paul says. So that's number one. Don't forget it. He says, don't forget that. And then number two, you've got to fight against the things, the sinful desires in you, not these great, huge, Hitler or Mussolini-sized sins that you're raging in inside of you. The small sins, which aren't small at all, of me putting myself in front of everybody else out. I'm deciding what everything's right and wrong and good and bad, and I'm running the show. And that's just pride. That's all it is. So he's saying, don't let that happen, and then live a life that is righteous, because the righteous life reflects the devotion to Christ. And other people will see that righteous life, and that will be your living evangelism. So that's the foundation of follow the law, the king's law, or the president's law, or the municipality's law. But they do give us that out that says if the law conflicts with what we know the gospel, then that's where we plant our flag. As Carol Lee said, that's where we make the stand. That's where we stand up and get counted. That's where we try to do something and make it count. But we're not doing it because we're doing it. We're doing it because Christ has already told us to do it way back when, and is continuing to move us toward action based on the intervention of the Holy Spirit. So it's just, when we're continuing to read through this, keep running back, keep turning your page back in the down moments and read chapter 2, 11, and 12 over and over again, because that's the foundation of everything that's coming up. And you can also throw in 22, which is the famous line, he committed no sin and no deceit was found in his mouth. So the actions that Jesus took to call in all of the problems of the culture and the society in which he lived, he did it without guile. He did it without that level of violence and accusation. He didn't do that. All right, who wants to? We beat that drum pretty well, unless you want to keep going with that part of it. Well, 20, keep reading 23. When they hurled insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to the one who judges justly. Just and again, it's going to say, they came after Jesus. He just kept going back to the Father. Came after Jesus, going back to the Father. It's all about the Father. It's all about Jesus. There's no other rationale in this or in Paul to take action. None whatsoever. And then we get into 3. Who wants to start 3? Let's read 3:1 through 3:6, and then we'll pick up 7 next time.
I want to back up a little bit if you can.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All right.
Yeah, this thing about but committed himself to him who judges righteously.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about Christ here, and he had been judged. Who's deciding that he was judged righteously?
Oh, he's throwing himself up to God.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah.
Okay, is that what that is? Okay.
Yeah. What verse are you at?
23. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously. Now,
Right.
that the thing that
The
he was not
Romans
reviling in return was the Romans that were
Right. But he was going by the righteous judge, aka God. Herod isn't
right,
righteous.
but the punishment or the thing, everything that he went through wasn't caused by God. It was caused by the people who judged him, and that the Romans and the Jews.
Right, but
And so,
I
how
think
can you
it's
say they
saying-
judged him righteously?
I think what it's saying is that he didn't put his trust in the Roman or the Jews. He put his trust in that he was on this mission for God. And this is the path for God. It's a little esoteric.
Okay, yeah, it's logical backflips again, but that's okay.
No. Wait a minute. So if I'm following the gospel, right, and I'm getting myself in trouble, I'm taking water to the woman in the desert because that's what Jesus tells me to do. That's what the
Right.
gospel says, you care for each other, and I get arrested and taken away, and they have threatened to put me in jail and all this terrible stuff. I'm trusting myself to the one who judges righteously, justly, which is God. It's not what they do to me. I'm trusting my actions to the gospel. I'm the one who judges righteously, justly is God, is Christ. I'm trusting that what I am doing in helping this woman is based on that. So I'm trusting that which is Christ, and for Christ to touch on that, which is the Father.
And you might get put in jail or you might get killed for that earthly law. But the earth is the law. The earth is not God's law.
Right.
And we need to follow God's law. And if we get, put in jail because we follow God's law, that's what happened with Jesus. He got put in jail. He got crucified and he died. And he was on God's path and following God's law. So in the end, God is the only one who judges righteously, and he will be rewarded for following God's law and his sacrifice for God's law. And that's the same with human beings. We follow his example.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I was just reading a memoir of a monk who got afoul the authorities during the 16th century, and they was asked at the point where he was going to be arrested and possibly killed by one of the people who loved him, was not a monk, but loved him in the community, and said, you know, you got to stop this because they're going to kill you. You know, they've judged you, they found you guilty, and they're going to kill you. Why are you doing this? Don't do this. And he said, why? And he said, because I'm trusting God. God has called me to this moment to do what God has called me to do, and he's my judge. And I'm doing what God has called me to do. It doesn't matter what they do to me. This is the cry of the martyr. You know, the martyrs went to their death because they were doing what God had called them to do, and God judges them righteously for how they answer that call.
And then they are rewarded in heaven.
Yeah.
They're rewarded by God. We just don't see that part
Yep.
yet.
So here it's just Jesus witnessing to that, as we would witness to Christ, saying, Christ is calling me to do it. He's my righteous judge. Jesus is saying, I'm doing what the Father is calling me to do. He's my righteous judge. Good question, Steve. Sorry, I jumped over that. Went too fast. But now it's 8:30, so we should wait on we should wait on the next one, because it begins chapter 3, and it's exciting because it connects us with Ephesians and Colossians and a whole bunch of other places that we can move around back and forth to. Ephesians, one of my most favorite books for this reason. Then we can get back to that. So if you want to read ahead, you can branch out and read some ancillary material in the Gospels and in Paul, and come back with more. We'll really tackle that one running, because it's wonderful. It's oftentimes read, if you read on a little bit right now, you're like, oh no. It's often read with some disdain, but I'll give you a little foretaste, is that the disdain that we carry because of what is written here in Ephesians is not because of what's written here in Ephesians. It's because what culture and society has done to it. That's just simple. But so go ahead and read it, but remember, it's not, don't read it through the lens of the culture. We're a resident alien. Read it through the lens of the gospel, and it cleans it up a lot. All right, guys. I hope that you all have a wonderful night.